My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
It's another Q&A edition of Optimal Health Daily, and I'm Dr. Neil, your host of the show. Hey there, and welcome back to another special Friday edition of Optimal Health Daily, where I answer your questions. On the other days, I read health and fitness blogs to you, kind of like an ongoing audiobook. Now, I'm going to keep this intro nice and short so we can get right to today's question and start optimizing your life. Today's question came via email. Kira writes, "Hello, I had a question I'd like to hear discussed. What can you say about spiritual health being related to overall health? Thanks." Thank you for taking the time to send in your question, Kira. I really don't end up talking about spiritual health all that much on this podcast, so I'm really glad you asked about this. A book I often do talk about on this show is The Blue Zones by Dan Buettner. In the book, Dan Buettner talks about 20 years of research on those areas around the world where people tend to live the longest. And not only do they live longer, but they often live happier and healthier lives than the rest of the world too. So the author dubbed these areas of the world blue zones. And the author found that those that live the longest, happiest, and healthiest lives tend to have a few things in common. And spoiler alert, they all relate to lifestyle habits. And here are just some of those lifestyle habits these blue zones have in common. They tend to eat whole foods more often, like fruits and veggies. They tend to stop eating before they feel stuffed. They socialize very often. They get enough sleep most nights. They move quite a bit each day. They manage their stress. They're involved in their communities. And they tend to nurture their religion or their spirituality. Now, if you or anyone has been listening to this podcast for any length of time, really, even just a week, you're probably already familiar with the health benefits of most of the habits I just mentioned. But let's dive a bit deeper into that last one, religion and spirituality. Here's what Blue Zones author Dan Buettner says about religion and spirituality specifically. Quote, "People who pay attention to their spiritual side have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, depression, stress, and suicide, and their immune systems seem to work better." End quote. Now, before we dive into how and why this is possible, let's separate the idea of religion and spirituality. For example, could someone define themselves as spiritual but not religious? Yes, absolutely. Here's why. Being religious means we belong to or follow a certain religion. Those that follow a specific religion usually attend services within a community of those that share similar beliefs. This means there's socializing that happens automatically and regularly. And this idea of socializing regularly relates to other Blue Zone lifestyle habits, like socialize often and getting involved in your community. In fact, most studies have found that attending religious services within the community probably reduces our risk for chronic disease and early death the most. Now, spirituality is a bit different. Being spiritual may or may not involve a religious component. There are lots of definitions of spirituality, but here's the one I like best. The recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there is purpose to my life and that this purpose is greater than myself. So, that means someone can be religious and spiritual, but it can also mean that someone can be spiritual but not religious, meaning they can believe that their life has a purpose and they believe in a higher power, but they don't follow a specific religion. So being religious or spiritual may be helpful when trying to incorporate another Blue Zone habit, managing stress. This is because those that are religious or spiritual may better understand that life events are often not within our control. They may believe that what we experience happens for a reason. For example, a religious person may believe that life events are in God's hands. Since life events are not necessarily within our complete control, it can relieve some of the stressful feelings we experience. Similarly, a spiritual person may interpret life events as part of their life's purpose or journey. And as a result, this attitude can relieve stress. That's because, as I've talked about many times before, much of the stress we experience is having a lack of control. But if we give up that control to a higher power or to our life's purpose, it can relieve stress. Now, there are some biases that exist with this type of research. Specifically, the majority of the published studies up until this point tended to include those that identify with Judeo-Christian religions. So, does that mean that those that follow Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Shinto, and so on also experience these same health benefits? We don't know until researchers actually study them. The other downside is the issue of time. For example, how often do we need to dedicate time to religion or spirituality? Let's think about exercise for a minute. We have very clear guidelines on exercise. Aim for 150 minutes of moderate intensity activities most or all days of the week. We have similar guidelines for nutrition. Try to consume at least 5 to 9 combined servings of fruits and vegetables each day. These guidelines exist because many studies have found that following these specific recommendations will likely keep us healthy. But what are the recommendations for religion and spirituality? There aren't any. So at this point, we don't know whether you need to spend 30 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week dedicated to your religion or to spirituality. For now, it's really up to you. Now, lastly, can someone that's not religious or spiritual still live a long, happy, and healthy life? Absolutely. Remember that many of the benefits of being religious or spiritual relate back to other helpful lifestyle habits, like being active in your community and being social. Thank you again for taking the time to send in your question, Kira. Now, if you want to submit a question to be answered right here on the show, you can email it to health@oldpodcast.com. You can also call in your question. The number is 1-61-I-LOVE-OHD. That's 1-614-568-3643. Or you can submit your audio question on the web at oldpodcast.com/ask. You can even listen back to your message and do retakes before officially sending it in. Again, that's oldpodcast.com/ask. All right, but that'll do it for another Q&A edition of Optimal Health Daily. Thank you so much for listening every day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow where your optimal life awaits.